All right, we're going to start this morning with former President Bill Clinton. He is waking up in the intensive care unit in a California hospital.
Yeah, he was admitted to the UC Irvine Medical Center while in the state for an event for his foundation. There's some new video from overnight, and it shows former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton leaving that Southern California hospital where her husband is being treated. This was just after midnight Pacific time. You see her going through the doors right there and into a waiting car. Now, in a statement, a spokesperson said the former president was being treated for a non-COVID infection and is on the mend, in good spirits. NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson joins us now from outside the hospital in Orange, California with the latest. So, Steve, what do we know about what happened here? What are doctors saying?
Yeah, Vicki, Lindsay, good morning. Lindsay, I think the last thing that you said is the thing to really seize on, that he's in good spirits, that he's conscious, he's communicative. We're told he's been up and walking around, talking to doctors, maybe even joking around with doctors. They said in a statement that he's generally been charming the staff. All of those good signs, but there is some cause for concern. He was taken here to UCI on Tuesday night, here for that Clinton Foundation event. We're told he was with a group of friends here in Orange County when he started feeling extreme fatigue. Started feeling that sickness, taken to the hospital here, admitted to the ICU, but we're told that ICU visit was only for privacy reasons, that not because it had morphed into something larger. There is reporting from CNN, doctors telling them apparently that he was taken for a urinary tract infection that then expanded to a more severe infection in the bloodstream. But again, he's been here for several days. We're told he's been on a steady IV drip of antibiotics and fluids, that he's been responding to those antibiotics very well, that his white blood cell count is down, which indicates that this is not a dire fight for his life, that again, this is an infection, that something that has been managed and treated with. And again, being in good spirits and being conscious and being awake and lucid, all good signs that he will recover. And doctors say in a statement that they expect him home soon.
Well, that is a very good prognosis there, Steve. You know, we just saw former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton leaving the hospital overnight. We just showed that video. We'll show it to you again. Now, she wasn't with her husband on this trip, but she did fly out to California when he was hospitalized. What more do we know about that?
You know, it's more good posturing, because we're told, the reporting is that Hillary Clinton came out as part of the Clinton Foundation visit, that it wasn't necessarily a rush to her husband's bedside. And then she was, you know, when she was spotted outside the hospital, there's reports that, you know, there was some smiling and laughing, and it was sort of jovial, maybe either with the staff that was with her or the staff at the hospital. So again, more good signs that point to this not being extremely dire, that the situation is under control, that the former president is doing well. Lindsay.
All right, Steve Patterson, good to hear that hopefully he will be going home soon. Steve, thanks so much.
All right, let's bring in NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel for more on this. Good morning, Dr. Patel. The official word is that the former president had a urological infection, as Steve just mentioned. Again, not related to COVID, but then it spread. So talk to us about what this means.
Yeah, Vicki, Lindsay, good morning. So, Vicki, this is actually an incredibly common occurrence. Having an infection, older men in the urogenital tract, start as a urinary tract infection. It also start as an infection related to the prostate. Again, very common in older men, and quickly can go beyond the urogenital tract, beyond kind of the prostate bladder area, and expand into the bloodstream. And that's exactly what it sounds like happens. That usually requires IV antibiotics. It has to take IV fluids, and it can turn into something that could require ICU hospitalization. Thankfully, in this case, the president did not need one. Treatment, antibiotics, fluids, and it sounds like he's on the mend, might even be switched over to oral antibiotics, all good signs that he's going to recover without any devastation.
Yeah, as Lindsay and Steve were just talking about, he's up, he's moving around. Talk about how serious an infection like this could be for someone who is Mr. Clinton's age. He's 75. I know you're not treating him, but in general, what does the treatment plan look like?
Yeah, so of course, the initial treatment plan really is to aggressively kind of contain this infection. That's done with antibiotics through the veins so that you can get it into as much of the bloodstream quickly as possible. The second is to be supportive. So in many cases, when an infection overwhelms your body tries, like in a COVID infection, Vicki, tries to attack it with as much of a response from all parts. And that can overwhelm the body itself. You have to support it with blood pressure medication sometimes, IV fluids. But as the infection subsides, all these other indicators, blood pressure, heart rate, fevers, should improve. So interestingly enough, he didn't have sepsis and he didn't need to have a high level of ICU care, but 1 in 4 cases of sepsis actually start in the urogenital tract. So it's something that we look for in older patients. They can present with urine discomfort, but Vicki, they can present with just fatigue and feeling off. So when I see patients that are older, over the age of 50, sometimes with men who are just feeling a bit off, we will check the urine and we'll check and do a detailed exam of the urogenital area because of this reason.
Okay, and I know that he was put in the intensive care unit to help isolate him as a precautionary measure.
Right.
But as we're hearing, signs are good. What do you think? How long is he going to have to be in the hospital before he can be released and maybe continue on those antibiotics from home?
Look, I tell all my patients that, the last place you want to be if you don't need to be is in the hospital. So what we usually look for is switching someone over to oral antibiotics and making sure that the infection is still being fought aggressively. So he could be discharged in 24 hours if they switch him to oral antibiotics and his signs continue to improve. All great news. Again, you want him to recover at home safely as possible.
Exactly. Well, it sounds like he is on the road to recovery. Dr. Kavita Patel, thanks so much for that insight.
There are promising new developments in the rollout of COVID vaccine booster shots. The FDA Advisory Committee is giving its full support for Moderna to administer the 3rd dose of its vaccine to millions of qualifying Americans. Of course, this comes just weeks after the committee gave the same support to Pfizer. And later today, we can expect to see the first review of Johnson & Johnson's booster shot application. NBC News Now correspondent Maura Barrett joins us now for more. So, Maura, yesterday we saw the FDA Advisory Committee. They recommended a Moderna booster for select groups of people. So who qualifies and what does this mean for people who originally got Moderna?
Well, Lindsay, this is going to look pretty similar in terms of who is eligible for the booster as what we saw with Pfizer last month. Basically, anybody who got Moderna and is 65 and older or 18 and older who is immunocompromised or could be at risk because of their workplace will be eligible for this booster. But what's different about Moderna is that its booster shot is only going to be 50 micrograms, which is about half of the original dose of Moderna. And so researchers are saying that this is going to provide enough of an immune boost to protect against the virus, but hopefully it'll cut back on a lot of those side effects that people experienced when they got the original Moderna shots. That fatigue, sore arm, and a lot of nausea was what people were reporting with Moderna. And now I want to reiterate, the vote was unanimous here to approve the booster shot, but doctors were really concerned about the conversation detracting from potentially people understanding that the vaccine is really effective for the first original 2 doses. And so while we're talking about booster shots, and it's going to be something that people who are eligible will want to consider, they're really still focused on making sure that Americans get vaccinated to start in the first place. And now as for next steps, the FDA will officially recommend, now that the advisory board has voted to approve that, and then it will go to the CDC advisory board next week before that official recommendation. So that means that these boosters could be available as soon as within the next week or so. Lindsay.
All right. And later today, we mentioned the FDA committee is going to look at Johnson & Johnson. So what will they be looking for among the data? And what do we already know about J&J's booster shot?
So J&J's question and answer period during the meeting today will likely be a little trickier than what we saw yesterday when I was watching the session around Moderna. And that's because the FDA is going to be looking at the data that Johnson & Johnson has submitted, suggesting that they need to figure out basically whether or not the booster for J&J is needed up to 6 months after the single dose or as early as 2 months. And so the FDA is saying that they didn't have enough time to review the data that J&J had submitted. And so that question and answer period that we're expected to see today could be more lengthy. That meeting is expected to last most of today, and then we'll get a vote on the J&J booster this afternoon.
Okay, sounds good. And so we've got 3 vaccines here. We're talking about 3 different kinds of boosters. Do you think we're going to learn anything today about potentially mixing and matching? So let's say I got J&J and I want to get a Pfizer or Moderna booster.
Well, that's the big question, right? And I think that's what's going to be most interesting from the FDA meeting today. But this is not something that they're going to be voting on. They're going to vote on the J&J booster, and then they're going to have this conversation to present data around whether or not this makes sense. Because as we know, J&J has been a lot less effective in protecting against the virus. And so they're looking at these studies, this new study from the NIH that came out this week, saying that anybody that gets the J&J vaccine initially, but then got a second dose of one of the mRNA vaccines, Pfizer or Moderna, was actually their antibodies were a lot higher than if they were to just get the J&J booster. And so this is something that doctors and scientists have been talking about for months now, but has not been officially approved. And again, I want to note with this study, not enough people were surveyed in it, and it didn't last as long as a lot of researchers would like. But experts are really hopeful that this is something that could be really beneficial for those that got the J&J vaccine initially, Lindsay.
Maybe not even just safe, maybe even more effective. All right, Maura Barra, we know you will keep updating us here on NBC News Now throughout the day. Thanks so much.
Well, the college football season is well underway, with stadiums from coast to coast packed with fans, many of whom are not wearing masks. It is a scene that has caused some concern among health officials. But have these games become the super spreader events the experts feared? NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster joins us now from Memphis, Tennessee, where the University of Memphis Tigers just hosted the Navy Midshipmen Thursday night. Good morning, Shaq. We are now in the 7th week of the football season. That's a lot of games with big crowds all over the country. But we are seeing COVID cases, hospitalizations, deaths trending down. So vaccines are now in the mix. What are we seeing in these football communities?
Well, they're saying that these events have not led to the super spreader events that were feared when you saw these crowds. I mean, you go back to September, we were in the height of the Delta surge in many parts of this country. So you saw those images similar to what you see on your screen, where you had packed crowds, people cheering at the games. And doctors were saying they were concerned about what they were going to see, and they feared that these would be sources of heavy transmission. Well, several weeks later, they're saying that simply did not happen. And I spoke to a doctor, an epidemiologist at the University of Florida, where they have games with some 90,000 fans. And while she was concerned initially, she said that it's clear that there was no transmission, no significant transmission connected to the games. I talked to her a little bit about the guidance that we heard then and what we're hearing now. Listen to what she said and how she explained the difference in what you're hearing now.
In the end, we learn sometimes by doing. We prefer to learn by studying, but I'd say in this case, we probably learned a little bit by doing as well. So it's not a matter of trying to keep people from doing activities. It really is a matter of trying to figure out, can these be done safely? Can we figure that out in a controlled environment?
So this is a good thing. And, many of the doctors are saying, look, they were being cautious. They were being conservative when they were giving that guidance. And look, they're saying now, looking at the data, it's clear that these outdoor events have largely been safe.
Well, Shaq, what are universities doing to prevent these games from being super spreader events, especially considering we had that very transmissible and deadly Delta variant? We know being outdoors makes a big difference. Is that basically the secret?
That is what they believe is the secret. I mean, one thing that you hear from doctors is that this virus is so dynamic. There are so many things that are changing, both on what they're understanding and what they know about the virus, and both how and also how the virus acts. It mutates, it changes its behavior. And, they say that these events have largely been safe for a few different factors. One, clearly it's outdoor. We've known for some time that the outdoor venue and the outdoor setting leads to lower transmission risk. But they also say that in the middle of this Delta surge, there was an increase in vaccinations. People took it more seriously. There was also some natural immunity that was built up, especially in the college-age population that was really impacted hard by the Delta variant. So they say it was a combination of factors that they believe ultimately led to these events being relatively safe. And again, they're celebrating that. They're saying it's a good thing. They would have liked to have done a study in advance of this, but now that they see and they're able to look back, we have several weeks of these games. We haven't seen any significant uptick. Instead, nationally, numbers are declining. They say they can now change their assessment and change their understanding about what they believe is the safety level for these events.
Look, that's reassuring. That gives football fans something else to cheer about. And you're right, the natural immunity, bringing that up in the college-age kids, that's something that's important as well on top of the vaccinations. You've been there. You've been talking to fans in Memphis. What are they saying about how they are managing COVID risk from these big gatherings?
Yeah, I got to go to the game last night and talk to some fans as they were both tailgating and once they got inside. And look, this is partially self-selecting because these are people who decided to come out, and these are big fans of their team here, the Memphis Tigers. But they said that they were comfortable with it. You know, one part that you heard, one thing that I noticed is there was a variation. There was discrepancy in mask wearing. You know, some people kept their mask on throughout. Some people just walked in with their mask. There's varying levels of comfort, and talking with doctors, they're saying that is how it should be. You know, you should be able to go ahead and adjust your behavior to your own comfort level. So if you are vaccinated and you're going to wear your mask, you can feel comfortable coming to a game like this where your exposure is not to thousands of people. It's really to the people in your pod, in your section, and you can assess your risk at that point. But I'll tell you, a lot of the fans, they were excited to be here after last season where they weren't able to tailgate, where they were limited in capacity. They say that the energy in the stadium that you feel is even more. It's even more exuberant. It's higher than it was even before this pandemic. They're excited to be able to go out and enjoy their football team and enjoy watching the game and cheer them on. By the way, the hometown team won yesterday. That was also a source of excitement and celebration yesterday.
Go Tigers. I'm no doubt you were the lucky charm there, Shaq. Thank you so much for that great reporting from Memphis.
Donald Trump will go under oath on tape on Monday. It'll be Trump's first video deposition since he was elected president in 2016. It has to do with a lawsuit by protesters who say they were beaten up by his security guards outside Trump Tower back in 2015. NBC News correspondent Tom Winter joins us now from New York. So, Tom, in addition to the former president, we also have his 2016 presidential campaign, the Trump Organization, and also Keith Schiller, who acted as Trump's bodyguard for years. These are all defendants. What do the protesters say happened?
Well, it all stems back to a September 3rd, 2015 incident. This was the day that the president was going to be, well, then the candidate, President Trump, was going to be giving a speech saying he was not going to run as a third-party candidate. He was going to make that pledge. They assembled outside of Trump Tower. They had other protests where they were speaking out about the president's statements about his immigration policy, about the wall. 6 of these people that have filed this lawsuit are of Mexican descent, and they say they were struck with fists, that they were somebody attempted to choke them, that their signs were torn up and taken down, and that they were essentially assaulted and cleared from a sidewalk for which there was no reason for them to be cleared from. So that's kind of the central allegation here, and this lawsuit was filed also in 2015 and has been winding its way through New York state courts.
You know, we got to mention this lawsuit was filed in 2015. So why has it taken 6 years here for these depositions to take place?
Right. So, you know, part of it is just the natural flow of a civil lawsuit, and then compounded with the issues that a president can bring when he's sued and when this action occurs in state court. So specifically in this case, in 2019, the judge ordered Trump to take this deposition that we're now talking about. However, Trump's legal team went to the appellate courts in the state of New York and said, look, he's the sitting president of the United States. He's got to run a country. That's what they said. The appellate courts essentially did not make a ruling on it. They just stayed the deposition and said, we're going to review this and stay it. And then once Trump was no longer the president, the arguments by his attorneys were moot. They've been trying to set up and schedule this deposition for a long period of time. This is something that usually never involves a judge's order. If you were to sue me and I was and the suit was moved forward and they lost numerous rounds of what's called summary judgment, essentially the case just continued to go forward, Lindsay, our attorneys would just work out some sort of a deposition. But in this case, because the president and now former president delayed it so long, while they needed the judge to step in.
So this isn't the first civil litigation that the former president is facing. I mean, do you think we're going to see more movement on all these more video depositions now that he's out of office?
It's certainly possible. There's several civil lawsuits that continue against the president. Of course, new lawsuits could be filed against him as well. So that's always the possibility. But this is one that we know is going to happen for sure because the judge ordered it. And I think that's the important part of this here. The judge had previously ordered it for that it needed to occur by the end of September. But because of the president's delays, now the judge is stepping in and saying, no, this Monday you will take it. And for some unforeseen reason that can't happen, some sort of a medical issue or other issue involving former President Trump, well, it's got to be done by the end of October. And that's what makes this concrete. And that's why we know this is actually going to occur.
Real quick, Tom, is the public ever going to see this deposition?
It's quite possible. If this case goes to trial, it would be played before the jury, would become an exhibit. It's also possible that portions of the deposition could be used in future legal filings. Those filings would be made public, and that would be something we could see as well.
All right, Tom, thanks so much.
Sure thing.
The showdown between the committee investigating the January 6th insurrection and former President Trump's longtime aide Steve Bannon is heating up. Bannon is defying a subpoena for documents and testimony related to the riot, so the committee says it is moving ahead with a vote to hold him in criminal contempt. NBC's senior Washington correspondent Hallie Jackson joins us now with the story. Hey, good morning, Hallie.
Hey, Vicki, good morning. Great to see you. And listen, holding Steve Bannon in criminal contempt would be a significant escalation for the January 6th committee, and it would send a signal to other witnesses that they've got to get on board with the investigation or there will be consequences.
Former Trump advisor Steve Bannon now on a collision course with Congress, with the committee investigating the January 6th insurrection, scheduling a vote next Tuesday to hold Bannon in criminal contempt for defying a subpoena. Bannon's attorney told the committee Wednesday the former Trump aide would not provide documents and testimony requested by the panel, citing the former president's assertion of executive privilege, an argument President Biden has refused to recognize. Committee Chairman Benny Thompson calling on Bannon to comply with the subpoena.
We think Steve Bannon has information that's germane to what happened on January 6th.
Bannon on his podcast Thursday, alluding to the committee's announcement.
In the news cycle, always in coming in hot.
Mr. Trump's lawyer has directed the former president's aides not to cooperate with the committee's investigation, with Mr. Trump himself, in a new statement, attacking the upcoming vote. According to the new book, Peril, Bannon was in touch with Mr. Trump in the run-up to January 6th, reportedly encouraging him in a phone call to kill the Biden presidency in the crib. So what would be next if the committee votes to hold Bannon in criminal contempt? The recommendation would move to the full House, which is controlled by Democrats. If the House votes to recommend contempt charges, it's up to the U.S. Attorney for D.C. to decide whether to prosecute Bannon. The committee says contempt of Congress can result in a fine and between 1 month and a year in prison.
While you've got Bannon defying the committee, two other former Trump aides are engaging. Former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and former Defense Department official Kavita Patel. A committee aide says they've agreed to postpone scheduled depositions of both men. And the committee's done the same for another Trump aide, former Trump aide, the former social media director Dan Scavino, because of a delay in serving his subpoena. Vicki, back to you.
So much more to come, and we know you'll stay on top of it for us. Hallie Jackson in Washington, D.C., thank you.
Life in prison. That's a sentence for 78-year-old convicted murderer Robert Durst this morning. The real estate heir was convicted of first-degree murder last month in the 2000 shooting death of Susan Berman. Just before her death, Berman was scheduled to speak with police about a fake alibi she allegedly gave Durst when his wife, Kathy Durst, disappeared in 1982. Kathy Durst was never found, and no charges were ever filed in her disappearance. Durst was sentenced yesterday in California. His lawyers say they plan to appeal. Let's get a check at your morning news now weather.
Hey, Bill Cairns, good morning and happy Friday.
Oh, it is, and it's weekend forecast time, and we have a lot of changes to talk about, and even some dangerous weather, too. If you've been on the East Coast, it's been so warm the first half of October, you know it has to come to a halt eventually, and this is the weekend that happens. So here's what's going on. So we had all the cold air in the west. That is going to move across the country. We have the warm air streaming up the eastern seaboard. In between, we have numerous areas of rain this morning. One of them just moved through Memphis, now heading for Nashville. Another area of rain through Indiana, heading for Detroit and Toledo. So definitely umbrella weather in those areas. And this afternoon, numerous areas of showers and storms from Tennessee, northern Mississippi, Kentucky. Have the umbrella handy, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio. And then tonight, overnight, that rain will move through Ohio, Pittsburgh, Buffalo. So Saturday morning, you're waking up to downpours from Rochester all the way down through West Virginia to Asheville, North Carolina. And then Saturday afternoon, D.C., Philly, New York, Baltimore, all of New England in the Northeast Saturday afternoon. That rain and thunderstorm threat's going to move on through. Those leaves are at their peak in northern New England and in the Great Lakes. So this is one of those rain events that'll probably knock down a lot of those gorgeous leaves. So severe weather threat, 25 million people at risk. If you're in the area of yellow, you have a chance of damaging winds, you have a chance of dangerous lightning, and maybe even isolated tornadoes, especially from Memphis to Nashville and an area from Cleveland up towards Buffalo, including Erie. So keep an eye on that late this afternoon and this evening. Then on Saturday, we may get a few strong storms in the Northeast and New England, but it's not going to be widespread. It'll be isolated strong storms from D.C. to Boston, all the way up through Vermont and northern New York. So for today's forecast, I mean, this is incredible. This will easily be the warmest day we're going to see probably till about next, maybe April or May. So if you like the warm weather, appreciate this. From the Carolinas through Washington, D.C., 84 degrees today in the middle of October. Even New York City hitting 80 degrees today. Boston at 73. And as I mentioned, it will cool off with that rain tomorrow afternoon in the Northeast. But look at the rest of the country. Gorgeous weather. I mean, top 10 weekend for Minneapolis to Chicago, Oklahoma City to Dallas. This is the weather you've been waiting for. I'll take sunny and 60s any day, and I think people are going to appreciate their weekends in the heartland.
Oh, definitely, and here in the Northeast as well.
Yeah. Wow, D.C. and my hometown Phoenix, same temperature today. Wild weather.
Unusual. All right, Bill,
Isn't that
thank
crazy?
you.
I know.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.